welcome back. If you've recently watched our header video, this is happening just a few minutes after we've buttoned up the final header that we're gonna keep on this car. If you're just tuning in now, hello! We've reached a point in the powertrain development that we're pretty happy with the car sits, and we've also decided that we are going to take this car and use it for time attack. Now, there are two categories specifically in time attack that this car falls into, this particular car, and that is Sport 4 or Tuner 3. Now, Tuner 3 is a category that has the Honda Civic Type R, it has the STI, it has the Golf R, it has the Focus RS, etc. While this car is lighter and it is better balanced from a sports car perspective, the higher power output of those turbocharged cars can have an edge over a car like this. So I feel that Tuner 3 is probably not the best place to put the car. However, Sport 4 is a really good place for it because I think it can be very competitive in Sport 4. So because of that, I want to talk a little bit about a suspension and brake prep for the car for it to compete in Sport 4. We find a lot of coilovers for these cars, and Justified, rightfully so, they give you a bunch of adjustability, people jump right to coilovers, but putting coilovers on the car will put you into that Tuner 3 category. So had to dig deep and create a package which you guys can find on our website, which I call the Sport 4 Time Attack package, and it's combining a few parts that give us better handling, the newly allowed camber adjustability in the front, which is a really big deal, which wasn't allowed in the sport category before, and also give us the braking improvements that we need. So I'm going to show you guys the parts that are going to go on the car. There's several steps to this build, but here are the basics of the Sport 4 handling and braking package. First of all, what we want to address is the camber adjustment. Cusco makes a really nice set of camber plates. We've used Cusco parts on a whole bunch of our Subaru builds, and they seem to be functional, and we have these on our site. Now, these will allow us to have additional front camber, which is essential for reducing some understeer, getting some more turn in, but also it's going to save your tires, and that's an important thing if you want to, not chew through tires every couple of track days, and you want them to last a little bit longer. So pairing the additional camber, we're allowed lowering springs, and Eibach is one of the few companies that has a set of lowering springs, and you can pair a quality set of lowering springs with a quality set of shocks and have some really good results, and with the camber plates. So that's what the front is going to look like. I haven't assembled the rear at all, but effectively it is going to be a set of Bilsteins also in the rear with the Eibach springs, and I am keeping the OEM top mount here, so that doesn't need to be adjusted or adjustable. We'll see how the car looks once we have all this installed. We'll see the ride height, we'll do the alignment, so you guys will see all of that. This is the basic stuff. I'm just gonna jump right into installing it because the track day is coming up really soon, and I wanna get the car ready. Like butter. Whew. So everything was going splendidly until it wasn't. As is often with car projects, even when you've got the tools and the lift and all that, you run into issues. So the issue that I've ran into is that you guys probably remember early on in the development of this car, we put on camber bolts, and these camber bolts have a cam inside that moves the knuckle as you twist the bolt. Well, that cam has a lip, and that lip is getting snagged on the shock, and because of that snagging, then what we end up having to do is that I can't pull this out. I've wiggled, everything's loose in here, and now it's come down to last resort measures, which are never fun. So we've got a reciprocating saw, we've got a bolt that's hardened steel, and with minimal space in here, I've been working at cutting this thing off. And hopefully by cutting the head off, it'll reveal exactly what's happening with the cam, we'll be able to remount the hole a little bit and pull out the cam side from inside there. Ta-da! Now, what in the, oh, I see what happened. So after cutting the head of the bolt off and examining the situation, here's what happened. It's a little pro tip for you. You can see the divot that's been cut in by the washer on there. So if you've got these type of crash style camber bolts, they go in here, and you can see that this washer has a tab. The tab should be lined up, the small tab should be lined up with the cam, or in other words, the big tab that you can see should be lined up away from the arrow on the bolt. If you don't do this, you're going to crush this small tab into the back of your strut, and then this thing, which is in here pretty tight, it will no longer want to come out. So that was a fun couple of hours of trying to figure that out. This is the OEM, and this is the new Eibach, Bilstein, and Cusco. Now, it might seem like the spring fits really well here as a perch. This is not actually a perch. The spring perch and insulator are still on the OEM side. So you can either buy new ones, or in this case, ours are pretty new since the car is fairly low mileage. We're just gonna take this apart using spring compressors, pull that out, and then install those parts onto the new shocks. The spool goes on first. Then you want to put your spring in. So just kind of line it up here. And you'll see there's a notch right here that the spring goes onto. And since we're going to be using the spring compressors, we want to line them up in such a way that they're out of the way of as many things as possible on the shock body. So once again, it's going to be a little notch here. Try and get that notch lined up with the end of the spring. That's how it was installed prior. Okay, so now your upper nut here, nice stainless steel nut, is in there, and everything is tight. So you can go ahead and try and remove these spring compressors. How's it going to look in the car? Well, first of all, make sure you have the, in this case we're doing the right hand side one. Thankfully, this is one of the easiest cars to line this up. It's a one-person job. So we're going to worry about the alignment once we have everything buttoned up in the car. So now we're going to go to the bottom side, slide in some bolts. So you've got your brake line to put back on. You've got these clips here for your ABS speed sensor. That's a Bilstein shock, Eibach springs, and the Camber adjustability. This is the Sport 4 legal setup. Now we're going to, before we do our final alignment of the car, I'm going to show you guys what the camber plates do. So I can move the, maybe, I have to loosen them up a little bit more. The top of the shock can now move from, this is positive camber because the top has come out, so your tire will lean in this direction, and this is now going to be negative camber. Stock is somewhere in between, somewhere like that. But these plates up top allow me to easily adjust the camber. Now for track purposes, we're going to maximize this as much as possible. So I'm going to push this in as far as possible. And with these plates, I'm happy to say that we're not interfering with the inside here at all. So this is pretty much as much camber as we can add using just springs and not the thinner coilovers that can go a little bit deeper. So then you go to the plates at the top, and you can see the same movement. So positive camber and negative camber all the way in. Now these are pretty small bolts, so I don't suggest going crazy on getting these super tight. And you can, of course, always check them at a later point. You don't want to strip these out. And we're going to do that for both sides, of course, to have them match. This is the OEM rear shock, OEM rear spring, and then the perch right there. If you're reusing the stock shocks, you have to reuse the front and the rear bump stops. Now, you have to, according to the IBOC instructions, of course, cut them down so that you do have proper shock travel. You don't hit and ride the bump stops at the lower ride height. And the Bilsteins, because they are an inverted shock, in the front, they have internal bump stops inside them. So you don't have to reuse any bump stops in the front, but you do have to use the bump stops in the rear from the OEM setup and assemble with the IBOC springs. So there's the OEM shock and spring, and then we're going to be reusing this top hat on the new springs and Bilstein shocks. We've got a pair of sway bars, front and back. They're red, but really the important thing is what do they do for the car. First of all, these are the IBOC sway bar kit. On this car, I feel that it's so well balanced from the factory is that if you're gonna mess around with sway bars, you should probably do front and back just to be able to balance them. You can also see that they have a 2-point adjustable, so you can go closer here, that's a stiffer point, and out here, they are a little softer. They're going to be stiffer than stock, and why would you want that? Well, you want that to resist a roll. So as the car drives through a corner, as you turn, the car will tend to roll. Now, you can resist the roll, you can increase the roll resistance of a car in a number of ways, one of which is, of course, the stiffness of your springs. And in this case, we're stuck with off-the-shelf springs. There aren't a whole lot of options. We went to the IBOC springs. With sticky tires, the stickier the tires that you have, the more you want to basically increase the roll stiffness to maximize contact patch and to get you around the corners faster. So being that we have the springs that are available from IBOC, having these sway bars in without making the ride any harsher and without having to adjust the springs, we're going to resist roll a little bit more. And because they're tunable, we're going to be able to adjust the balance front to back. So the stiffer you go in the back, the more tail happy the car goes, the more oversteer you have, and the stiffer you go in the front, generally speaking, the more understeer you have. It's all about balance to make it the fastest possible combination and to make it safe and enjoyable and fast. All those things come together. The IBOC bar is significantly larger. You can clearly see the difference. So let's see if we can snake this one in. Okay. Nice. Let's talk about the final setup of our Sport 4 suspension package on the BRZ. First of all, we ran into a small snag. The rear shocks with their perches were not fitting the IBOC springs. We talked to Bilstein about it. We're gonna get this rectified with Bilstein so that when you see this package on our website, it's going to fit no problem. But what we needed to do to make these shocks fit is we needed to pull out 3 millimeter in diameter from the bottom spring perch because the spring was just not seating down properly onto the perch. After doing that, installed beautifully. The car, as far as I could tell so far, we're gonna take it to the track real soon. Handles really, really nice. The FRS right in front of us here has the ST XTA coilovers. It's had it for a number of years. I just drove this in today. I've been driving it over the last month, so I know exactly how it feels on a very, very similar chassis. And I can tell you that unless you really want ride height adjustment, going with a quality shock and a good spring like this, you're not going to be leaving much in terms of both looks and performance on the table. And this allows the car to be in Sport 4. It was also really interesting to drive with the sway bars. The ride is much more controlled. There's a lot less body roll in the corners, as you can expect. We're gonna see how that translates into track performance in a couple of days, but already on the street, it feels really good. And I got the front and the rear, they're both set to stiff, and they feel really good so far. Honestly, the car feels extremely planted. It feels a little bit more planted than the Gen 1 car, which does not have the sway bars. In terms of tires, these are the 235 width tire, and on this wheel, they fit just perfectly on the car. So the wheel is 17 by 8.5, the 235 tire, this tire runs really wide, the RT660, it just fills in this area. It's beautiful stance, and there's no rubbing even with such a wide tire. In the front, the same thing, no rubbing, no issues. These wheels, we're planning to probably have them on our website as well, because they're just such a nice looking wheel for the car. And in terms of the final alignment numbers, they turned out just great. So we're only adjusting camber through the camber plates, the Cusco camber plates. We have 2.9 degrees negative camber up front, which is very good for a spring, shock, and camber plate combo, which is also a class legal for Sport 4. In the back, we're right at -2. Again, really ideal amount of camber, not too much, not too little. And I added in some toe-in. I maxed the specification in the rear for toe-in. The reason I did that is because I wanted as much rear end stability on the track as possible. So as you accelerate, the car will naturally start to toe out. So if you add some static toe-in, it's going to be more stable under power. So I can't wait to get this car on track here. It was a very good journey in getting all these parts installed. Of course, we'll give you guys the feedback of how it is on track, but on the street, it feels phenomenal. Pulls well with our tuner and our other mods on here, and it's just it also looks amazing. That's the Sport 4 setup. Now it's time to enjoy it, and really the best part about cars like this is that they're within reach of a lot of people compared to something that's much more expensive. You have to spend so much more to get into a car that will give you a more pure sports car experience, more enjoyment than these BRZs. So there's obviously faster cars out there. There's, you know, a lot of other options out there, but from just a pure sports car experience, not much is left out there. So pick up these cars, enjoy them, modify them. Subaru has made these cars very, very accessible for modifications, and that's another huge plus. So we'll see you guys in the next one, and until then, enjoy.